The smell of smoke drifted through the abandoned warehouse long before Officer Daniel Harper realized where it was coming from, and by the time he did, the cold fear in his chest told him he was already running out of time, because his hands were bound behind his back, his radio lay shattered on the concrete floor several feet away, and the man who had dragged him there had vanished into the shadows with a promise whispered low and cruel that no one was coming, a promise that echoed in Daniel's mind as flames crept closer, licking at broken wood and discarded trash, casting long, trembling shadows on the walls while his heart pounded not just with fear but with the heavy thought of his wife waiting at home, his young daughter asking why daddy worked late, and the countless small, ordinary moments that suddenly felt unbearably precious. Daniel had joined the police force believing in service, in protecting people he didn't know, in doing the right thing even when no one was watching, and now, faced with the terrifying silence of that warehouse, he wondered if that belief had been naive, if kindness and duty really mattered in a world where cruelty could strike so easily. And as the heat grew stronger and the air thickened, panic threatened to take over until he forced himself to breathe slowly, remembering the academy lessons about staying calm, about holding on to hope even when logic said there was none, because hope, his old training officer had once said, was sometimes the only thing that kept a person alive. Outside, far beyond the warehouse walls, a pickup truck slowed on the deserted road, its engine humming softly as a man in his late 30s scanned the area with sharp, disciplined eyes, his posture relaxed but alert in a way that came from years of experience, and beside him sat a large, focused K9 with intelligent eyes, ears twitching at every unfamiliar sound. The man's name was Ethan Cole, a former Navy SEAL who had learned long ago that danger didn't always announce itself loudly, and the dog, a Belgian Malinois named Ranger, was more than a partner, more than a tool, he was family, a loyal presence that had stood beside Ethan through storms of chaos and moments of quiet healing after the war. Ethan hadn't planned to stop near the warehouse that night, he was just driving home after a long day volunteering at a veterans center, but something felt wrong, a subtle instinct he had learned to trust when life depended on it, and Ranger sensed it too, lifting his head, nose working the air, a low, uneasy sound forming in his throat as if he were trying to say, "Something isn't right." Ethan pulled over, stepped out into the cool night, and smelled it then, smoke, faint but unmistakable, his mind shifting instantly from civilian calm to operational focus, not because he was looking for trouble, but because he couldn't ignore the possibility that someone needed help, and in that moment, the lessons of service he had carried since his SEAL days resurfaced, reminding him that humanity wasn't something you turned off when you retired, it was something you lived by. Inside the warehouse, Daniel coughed as smoke curled higher, his arms aching from the strain of the ropes, despair creeping in as the fire crackled louder, and he thought of how many times he had told victims that help was on the way, how many times he had asked them to trust him, to hold on just a little longer, and now he was the one whispering those words to himself, unsure if anyone would ever hear them. The sound that cut through the chaos came faintly at first, a sharp bark echoing off the metal walls, and Daniel's heart leapt even as his mind told him not to get his hopes up. But then it came again, closer this time, urgent and alive, followed by the unmistakable shape of a dog bursting through a side entrance, eyes locked on him, movements fast and precise, with a man right behind him moving with calm determination, shouting reassurances that felt like a lifeline thrown across a raging river. Ethan didn't hesitate, his focus narrowing to the bound officer and the growing fire, trusting Ranger to assess the threat as he rushed forward, cutting through the ropes with practiced efficiency, his voice steady as he told Daniel to keep breathing, to lean on him, to trust that they would get out, and in that moment, Daniel felt something break loose inside him, not fear but relief so intense it brought tears to his eyes, because someone had come, not because they were obligated by a badge or a rule, but because they cared enough to stop. They moved quickly, Ranger guiding them through the clearest path as smoke thickened, Ethan supporting Daniel's weight without complaint, his mind calculating exits and risks while his heart pushed him forward, refusing to leave another human being behind, and when they finally stumbled into the open night air, Daniel collapsed to his knees, gasping, overwhelmed by the simple miracle of breathing freely again, while Ethan crouched beside him, one hand steady on his shoulder, Ranger standing guard with quiet vigilance, the fire behind them crackling but no longer a threat. Sirens approached in the distance, drawn by the smoke and the call Ethan had managed to make once Daniel was safe, and as emergency lights painted the night in red and blue, Daniel looked up at the man and the dog who had saved his life, struggling to find words that felt big enough, because thank you seemed too small, too ordinary for what they had done. But Ethan only smiled softly and said that anyone would have done the same, a statement Daniel knew wasn't true, because it took a special kind of courage to act when walking away was easier. In the days that followed, the story spread through the department and beyond, not as a tale of violence, but as a reminder of what humanity looked like when it showed up unannounced, and Daniel found himself changed in ways he hadn't expected, slower to judge, quicker to listen, more aware of how fragile and precious life was, while Ethan returned to his quiet routines, volunteering, training ranger, carrying the memory not as a burden but as confirmation that his skills still had a purpose rooted in compassion rather than conflict. Months later, when Daniel invited Ethan and Ranger to his home for dinner, introducing them to his family, laughter filled the room, and his daughter knelt to hug Ranger's neck, unaware of how close her world had come to losing something irreplaceable. And as Daniel watched this scene, he felt a profound realization settle in his chest, that courage wasn't always about dramatic heroics or strength alone, but about choosing kindness in moments when it mattered most, about answering a silent call for help simply because you could. The night ended with handshakes and quiet gratitude, but the impact lingered far beyond that evening, rippling outward in small, unseen ways, inspiring Daniel to mentor younger officers with more empathy, encouraging Ethan to continue using his experience to serve his community, reminding everyone who heard the story that even in the darkest moments, when escape seems impossible and fear threatens to take everything, the simple act of one person stopping, caring, and acting can change everything, because hope doesn't always arrive with sirens blazing. Sometimes it comes in the form of a former Navy SEAL, a loyal K-9, and a decision to believe that every life is worth saving.